This is KCCK's Culture Crawl. I'm Dennis Green, and my guest is Tim Hankewich, maestro of Orchestra Iowa, who has, for those who are watching the video, who has dressed appropriately for his final Cultural Crawl performance appearance.
That's right.
Of the season to talk about the final concert in Tim's 10th.
Tim's 10th.
The termination of Tim's 10th.
Nothing like a little alliteration. Yeah.
Is tantamount.
What a terrific introduction. You know, this is the downhill run of my 10th season, and it's been quite the birthday party. I mean, the whole season has just been a real great gift, and yeah, we cap it off with, I think, arguably the biggest of them all, and we've had some great moments over the season. But this weekend, actually, and just on Saturday, probably one of my big bucket list pieces that I've never had a chance to perform before, and I've always aspired to. We get a chance to perform.
The concert is called A Hero's Life.
Right, which means the unifying thread through the entire program is each piece is about a particular hero. We begin with a work by Sibelius called Lemminkainen's Return, and for you Finns out there, that's a big, huge hero in Finnish folklore. Then we perform a work by Wagner, which, by the way, is the very piece that got me turned on to classical music.
Nice.
It's called Siegfried's Funeral March, and I first heard it in the 1980s during the movie Excalibur, starring Helen Mirren. I loved that movie so much. I even rented the video several times just so I could look at the closing credits so I could find out what this piece was. That's how much it grabbed me. And so it was that moment that really turned me on to symphonic music. So that's the reason it's on the program. There's another piece by Dvorak, which is his very last orchestral piece that he wrote. It's called A Hero's Song, and it's sort of autobiographical about his life and career. And it was written 1 year before the final work on the program, which is really the flagship of the entire season, which is Strauss's Ein Heldenleben, which means a hero's life. And this, too, is a musically autobiographical work about the composer. And for anybody who's a fan of the music of John Williams, all of John Williams' music has been ripped off of the music of Richard Strauss, and this piece in particular. It is just roaring over the top, hyper-romantic, incredibly virtuosic. Because of the forces that you require on stage, for example, 9 French horns, the expense is quite high, and so you don't get a chance to perform it or hear it very often. And because it's been my 10th, I've pulled rank because I know a few people at the symphony. We were able to do this work, and this is a piece that I've always aspired to do, and now is the occasion for us to perform it. And I can't tell you how much I'm looking forward to this, and I know our musicians are just salivating getting a chance to play this piece.
And so a little bit bigger of an orchestra.
Yeah, the place, the entire stage is going to be absolutely packed with musicians. And I think one of the reasons why musicians really gravitate to this kind of music is not only the spectacle of the size, but the way the composer writes for each instrument. There is not a superfluous note. So if you're a piccolo player or a contrabassoon player or the fourth percussionist, usually you spend most of your time counting measures and not playing much. In this, everybody has a unique role to play that's really virtuosic and exploits the full capability of each instrument, because Strauss was a master orchestrator, which is why everybody in that orchestra is like chomping at the bit to play this piece, because it really is the Ferrari, if you will, of symphonic music.
And you have picked quite a few pieces throughout the course of the year that, for one reason or another, do not get performed very much.
Right, and a lot of it's just due to the difficulty. I think a couple weeks ago we did the Beethoven Missa Solemnis, and one of the reasons it's not performed very well is the demands it requires of the chorus. Not your everyday average chorus cannot sing this piece. It's just too strenuous and too complex. Before then, we did the full Firebird ballet, which you hear the music in its suite form, in its cadensed form in concert, but you never get a chance to see it and witness it as it was originally intended. And so there was a lot of rarities, and that music itself also requires incredible virtuosity and capability from your orchestra. So now, after 10 years of building this orchestra to a place that I'm really proud of, I get to let these musicians run and really shine on their own behalf. And I can't think of anything more fitting than to end this season with this work by Strauss, which is such a monument. And what's really neat about it is there's a plot that goes along with this particular piece, and it's essentially a love story between the composer and his love interest, and they are all represented by instruments. For example, the French horn depicts the hero, and the violin of the concertmaster, which will be brilliantly played by Don Gingrich, represents his love interest. And so basically there's a section that represents the hero, then his critics, then his love interest, and then there's a battle between his critics and the hero, and you hear all these great themes go back and forth, and then the last two movements essentially is the hero is victorious, and you get to hear all his great works of peace that he's given to the world, and then finally he turns to Elysium, and all the themes that you hear in the first half of the program come back in this transformed way that is just beyond gorgeous. It's so moving.
All the best music tells a story.
Exactly right. And in fact, there was a time when this was written that there was a big controversy. Should music actually tell a story, as this does? It's called programmatic music. Or should music be just an object called absolute music, something that you would just call a symphony or a sonata, something that should just exist because it exists? And that was a real big controversy at the end of the 1800s, early 1900s. And of course, Strauss was one who really believed that music should really tell a story.
Talking with Tim Hankewich from Orchestra Iowa about Hero's Life, the final concert in Tim's 10th season, coming up this weekend. So was it the Sibelius that was in Excalibur?
No, it was the work by Wagner. Called Siegfried's Funeral March. Now, this is something that appeared in one of his many operas that are like 4 hours long, but it was...
So this is one that you didn't even try to tell the board, yeah, we have to do...
No.
We have to do the whole thing.
I would not be working here anymore if I said we have to do the whole opera. But the funny thing is that the techniques that Wagner used is exactly what Strauss took up about 15, 20 years later, something called the leitmotif, when there is a theme that represents a person or a character or an idea.
Most of us know, many of us, our first exposure to that was in the music of Star Wars.
Absolutely. You know Darth Vader's theme, you know Luke Skywalker's theme, you know Princess Leia, exactly right. That's the whole idea behind how this music is constructed. But the power of that music... by the way, the Siegfried's Funeral March is from something called The Ring of the Nibelung, which was essentially Lord of the Rings, long before Tolkien ever came around. And so it has that sort of extra musical, magical quality.
This is one of the all-time great Germanic. I studied this in college. Yeah. So it's one of the all-time great Germanic works of literature that Wagner then set to music.
Absolutely right. And this is why I'm just so delighted that I discovered it on the back end. I didn't start with the literature. I started with the music itself. And when I still hear it, I can't help but think of the movie Excalibur, just because it was such a powerful movie in my adolescence that still stuck with me. But I tell you, it is the ultimate man movie for anybody who's listening, and you've got to see it.
Lots of swords.
And man, when you hear this music in that context, it's just... it's stunning. And so here I am. I'm pushing 50 already, and that experience, I still haven't been able to shake that. It's been so powerful.
So you said, I was going to ask, what's your mental image when and of course you mentioned, that it always evokes Excalibur. But as a musician, as you're listening or as you're preparing to conduct this piece, and now of course you know it in a totally different way.
Right.
Then so tell me a little bit about how you. How you appreciate it when you now stare at the score and think about how the orchestra is going to render it.
Sure. When you come into my world, the musical world, that it's like a car enthusiast. When you actually look under the hood and you see what kind of engine and is the body really in mint condition, and then you can really geek out about all the details. But what's really what never ceases to amaze me after all these years in the profession is how the real great composers orchestrate. And that, for the layperson, it basically means how do you write a work for a symphonic orchestra and exploit the tonal colors of each instrument in such a masterful way?
Why does the violin play here? Why does the bassoon play here?
Right.
When does the French horn stop playing?
Right. And why does it work when they stop playing or when they do start playing? And it's not just that everyone's playing at the same time. The various combinations of instruments are almost infinite, yet the really great orchestrators really know when to use these things. And so that's what really strikes me when I look at the music of Wagner and I look at the music of Strauss. When I look at the music of Dvorak, it's what I really appreciate is how he was able to capture the flavor and the spirit of Czech folk music. A lot of the melodies that he writes sometimes are quotations of folk song, but often it's just him writing in the style of, and you can't tell the difference. Is that really a folk song, or is that something newly composed by Dvorak himself because he was so steeped in his culture? That's what I find so impressive about him. And then when I turn to the music of Sibelius, what I find so remarkable is how he was able to evoke the sense of his countryside into his music, the actual pictures of his landscape, because there are such vast vistas in Finland, and how he's able to actually translate that into music. It's something that you can't put into words really, but when you hear it, you say, yeah, that can only be a vast meadow or a huge vista overlooking a fjord or something like that, because the way composers are able to translate their culture into music is something that is endlessly fascinating to me.
The concert is Hero's Life. It's this weekend with Orchestra Iowa. Saturday at the Paramount Theater?
Yes, at 7:30, and you can get tickets at orchestraiowa.org, or you can call the box office at 1-800-369-TUNE.
One night only.
One night
because
only.
Because the orchestra is too big to move.
Alas, that is one of the drawbacks of having such great works like this. You're right, because there's so many people on stage, it's kind of hard to move them around the state.
So one night only this Saturday night. Again, orchestraiowa.org. Well, I know that you've spent this whole year, Tim,
yes,
pulling stuff off your bucket list, but you've left us a few things for Tim's 20th.
That's right.
There
will always be something out there. And
there's a few left.
Listen, and as the weather is getting great and summer, well, it's in fact here. I want to wish you and your listening audience all the best, and have a terrific couple months of the summer.
Well, you have a relaxing time off, and we'll look forward to talking again in the fall.
We'll see you at Brucemore.
Yeah, we'll see you at Brucemore coming up. That'll be here before we know it.
True.
Tim Hankewich from Orchestra Iowa. Again, orchestraiowa.org if you'd like more information about Hero's Life or to get a head start on the 2016-2017 season. Tim, thanks again.
Thank you very much.